My 38-year-old neighbor came to my door at midnight, and within 10 minutes she changed my life. I was about to turn off the light when the knock came sharp, urgent, the kind of knock that doesn't belong at midnight unless something has gone wrong. My hand paused on the switch. A strange heaviness tightened in my chest. For a moment, I thought it might be trouble, an accident, maybe even the police. But when I opened the door, it wasn't any of that. It was her. Marin stood on my porch wrapped in a thin nightgown with a sweater pulled tight around her shoulders, her dark hair damp from the mist outside. Her eyes were wide, not with fear exactly, but with the kind of uncertainty a person carries when they haven't quite decided if they should be standing where they are. And in those first 10 minutes, something in my carefully arranged life shifted. My name is Adrian, and I've been 50 for long enough to know how silence feels. 10 years divorced, living alone in a quiet suburb where the loudest noise is the hum of the street lamp at the corner. I've built a life that looks steady from the outside, steady job at a construction supply company, bills paid on time, a house that stays clean because no one else ever walks through it. But inside, it's been empty. The kind of emptiness you grow used to, the kind you stop fighting because fighting makes it worse. That night, the silence broke. "I'm sorry to bother you," she whispered. My power went out. I didn't know who else to ask. For a second, I just stood there barefoot, surprised by how vulnerable she looked. I'd seen her around passing in her yard, waving with groceries, but I never knew her beyond a polite smile. She was younger, maybe 40, a widow since a few years back. I'd heard the whispers, the kind neighbors think they're whispering kindly. But tonight, she wasn't the young widow from down the street. She was a woman standing in the dark, asking for help. I moved aside and told her to come in while I grabbed a flashlight. She stepped inside hesitantly, the scent of rain clinging to her. Her eyes moved around my living room like she wasn't used to being in anyone else's space anymore. I walked her back across the lawn to her place. The night air was cool, and she held her sweater close without saying a word. The silence between us felt thick, full of things neither of us knew how to name. Inside her house, I checked the breaker. Simple fix. A tripped switch. "All good," I said, but she stayed close, almost as if my presence steadied something inside her. When the lights flickered back on, she exhaled softly, the kind of relief that comes from something deeper than a dark room. "Thank you," she said, finally meeting my eyes. And something passed between us, not flirtation, not just gratitude, but weight. Like she carried more than she let anyone see. I couldn't just let her walk away like that. Back in my kitchen, I made tea. She sat at my table, her fingers wrapped around the cup even though it was still too hot. We spoke little, just small words that somehow felt bigger. "I've been alone for a while," she admitted quietly. "Sometimes nights feel heavier." I understood that more than I wanted to say out loud, so I didn't push. We sat in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just two people who had carried too much quiet, finally sharing a fraction of it. When she stood to leave, she hesitated. "I don't usually bother people," she murmured, eyes lowered. "But tonight I just couldn't sit in the dark anymore." When the door closed behind her, I stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space she'd left. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew something inside my predictable life had cracked open. The next morning, sunlight hit my driveway as I walked toward the mailbox. Marin stepped out of her house at the same time, a tired softness still around her eyes. She hesitated, then crossed over. "I didn't properly introduce myself last night," she said. Maureen Morgans." "Adrian," I said, though she already knew that. People in suburbs always know more than they say. We talked for a few minutes, the weather, the street repairs, the cold autumn nights. Words that felt ordinary on the surface, but carried something unspoken beneath. At work later, my friend Reed noticed the distraction I couldn't hide. "You look like a man who found something he wasn't expecting," he teased. Then he added with a grin, "Or someone." I brushed him off, but he wasn't wrong. That evening, I saw her again. She was carrying too many grocery bags, trying to balance them, her shoulders tense from the weight. I crossed the yard before I even realized I'd moved. She didn't protest when I took half the bags from her. Instead, she let out a soft sigh, The kind of sigh people release when they're used to doing everything alone. Inside her kitchen, the space felt untouched, a home but unlived. No photos, no clutter, just silence. It's hard to put things back the way they used to be, she said softly. Sometimes it's easier to leave it all unfinished. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything at all. And she seemed to appreciate that. But that quiet moment didn't last. Her brother Blake walked in without warning. His eyes immediately narrowed on me. Suspicion sharpened his voice as he asked, "Who's this?" And suddenly, everything shifted again. Blake's arrival wasn't just interruption. It was the first sign that whatever was growing between Marin and me wasn't going to stay simple. Blake's stare stayed fixed on me, sharp and unwelcoming. As if my presence in Marin's kitchen was some kind of intrusion he had the authority to judge. Marin hurried to explain, "This is Adrian. He was just helping me with the groceries." But the tension in her voice told me she already anticipated his reaction. "Helping," Blake repeated, his tone dripping with suspicion. "You don't need help, Marin. Especially not from strangers." I wanted to defend myself, but this wasn't my moment. Marin's cheeks flushed, caught between gratitude and discomfort. "Blake, please," she whispered, but it only made his jaw tighten. I set the remaining bag on the counter and stepped back. "I should get going," I said quietly. Marin's eyes met mine, soft, apologetic, almost pleading, and that look stayed with me long after I walked out her door. That night, my living room felt smaller. The TV flickered, the clock ticked, but none of it drowned out the memory of Blake's hostility or the heaviness in Marin's eyes. I didn't know what their history was, but it was clear he had built walls around her walls she didn't know how to break. It was almost midnight when I heard footsteps on my porch. When I opened the door, Marin stood there again, not trembling this time, just tired. Tired in the way people are when they've been fighting a battle no one sees. "I'm sorry about earlier," she whispered. "Blake thinks he's protecting me. He doesn't understand that sometimes I just need someone to sit with." I let her in without a word. She walked to the couch and sat quietly. I took the chair across from her. The silence settled between us, not heavy this time, just fragile. Her fingers brushed the edge of the armrest, close enough to mine that a quiet warmth spread through the space between us. For a moment, neither of us moved. It was nothing, just stillness. Two people breathing in the same room. But somehow it felt like more than anything we could have said. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated exactly the same way she had the night before. "I don't know what this is," she admitted softly, her voice almost breaking. "But, thank you." The next few days were quieter, too quiet. People in the neighborhood had started watching, whispering. Mrs. Ellison, the queen of the street, eyed me over her fence like she was observing a crime scene. "I've seen Marin leaving your house," she said pointedly. "People will start talking, Adrian." She didn't say it like a warning. She said it like a promise. By the next night, Marin already knew. She sat in my kitchen, twisting her scarf nervously. "They think I'm reckless," she murmured. "Like I'm chasing trouble." I wanted to tell her none of it mattered, but I knew it did. She lived in a world where every move was watched, judged, noted. "I don't care what they say," I told her gently. "I know who you are." She gave a small, tired smile, but doubt clouded her eyes. "That's the problem," she whispered. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Her words pierced something in me. Not pity recognition, because I knew exactly what it felt like to lose yourself in the silence of your own life. 2 days later, things escalated. Blake confronted me in front of the hardware store where I worked. He grabbed my arm, leaning in, his voice low and sharp. "Stay away from her." I pulled my arm free. "She can make her own choices." "She's fragile," he shot back. "And you're, what? Some lonely man who thinks he can fix her." Anger flared inside me. "I'm not trying to replace anyone," I said. "I just care." For a moment, I thought he might hit me. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened, but he turned and walked away, tossing over his shoulder. This isn't over. The adrenaline stayed long after he was gone. That night, I didn't expect to see Marin. But just after midnight, the soft knock returned. When I opened the door, she stood there, with tears pooling in her eyes, her hands trembling lightly. I can't do this alone anymore, she whispered. I stepped aside, and she walked in. Not to sit, not to talk. She stood in the middle of my living room, trying to hold herself together. Every time I think I'm ready to move forward, someone reminds me I should stay frozen, she said. Like loving again would be betrayal. I didn't rush to her. I simply stood close enough that she could feel I wasn't leaving. Eventually, she looked up at me, her eyes raw and searching. I'm terrified, she whispered. Terrified of what this is. Terrified of what people will say. Terrified of what it means if I feel anything for you. Her hand brushed mine barely, but neither of us pulled away. That single touch felt like a confession. She stepped closer, her breath unsteady. Adrian, I don't know what people expect of me, but I know what I feel when I'm here. And that scares me more than anything. I took her hand gently, letting our fingers interlace. She didn't pull away. Not this time. We stood there in silence, the lamp's glow soft around us, the moment trembling with possibility. Then suddenly, she let go. Not out of fear, out of decision. I can't, she whispered. Not yet. She stepped back, tears in her eyes, and moved toward the door. She paused, her voice barely a breath. You scare me, because with you, I can finally imagine being alive again. She left before dawn, and I stood there, shaking not from fear, but from the truth she'd just handed me. The next evening, when I walked onto my porch, I froze. Blake's truck was parked in my driveway, and Blake himself was standing at my door holding something in his hand. Something that changed the entire direction of what was unfolding. Blake didn't knock. He stood planted on my porch like a warning sign, his fists tight at his sides, eyes burning with something between anger and fear. In his hand, he held a worn photograph, its corners bent, its surface creased from years of being held. When I stepped closer, I recognized the woman in it. Marin. Not the Marin I knew now, but a younger version, happier. Arms wrapped around the man she once loved, the man she lost. Blake didn't wait for me to speak. You don't know what she went through, he said, his voice rough. You don't know how long it took her to breathe again. She was finally stable. Finally okay. And now, he shook his head, jaw clenching. You're dragging her backward. I swallowed the sharp pressure rising in my chest. I'm not dragging her anywhere. She came to me. That's the problem. He snapped. She comes to you when she's weak, when she's lonely, when she can't think straight. His words were knives, but I didn't move. Blake, I said quietly, maybe she comes to me because she finally wants something for herself. He flinched a tiny shift, but I saw it, a truth he didn't want to accept. For a moment, the two of us just stood there in the cool evening air, the weight of grief and fear between us. Then, Blake slammed the photo into my chest. Stay away from her, he said, or I swear, you'll break what's left of her. He didn't give me a chance to respond. He walked off my porch, got into his truck, and sped away, leaving dust and threat hanging behind him. I looked down at the photograph in my hand. Marin smiling, radiant, alive in a way I'd never seen. I didn't know if I could ever live up to that memory. But I also knew Marin wasn't meant to live inside a photograph forever. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I sat in the dark with the photograph lying on the table. The house felt colder than usual, the silence sharper. Every thought circled back to Marin, her trembling hands, her quiet confessions, the softness in her voice when she let herself believe in something more. Near dawn, I walked outside, needing air. The sky was a pale blue, the kind that arrives just before sunrise. Across the street, Marin's porch light was on. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, looking like she hadn't slept either. When her eyes met mine, she hesitated. Then she walked toward me, slow, uncertain, but with a determination that felt fragile and brave at the same time. Blake was here, she said quietly. I nodded. He showed me a picture of you and your husband. Her breath caught, and for a moment she looked so small, so breakable, that I wanted to pull her into my arms. But I didn't move. I let her choose the distance. He thinks you'll hurt me. Her voice cracked. He thinks I'm still too broken to want anything real. And what do you think? I asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Instead, She looked toward the horizon, where the sun was starting to touch the rooftops. I think grief doesn't disappear, she whispered. It changes shape. And sometimes, when something new shows up, it hurts because it feels wrong to feel alive again. She looked back at me, eyes shining with the morning light. But when I'm with you, Adrian, I don't feel broken. Those words hit deeper than anything Blake had said. She stepped closer, just a small step, but enough to close the distance. This time, when her hand reached for mine, there was no trembling, no hesitation. Our fingers interlaced naturally. I'm scared, she admitted, but I'm more scared of stopping here. I don't want my whole life to be a story that ended years ago. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding my breath until it escaped. I'm here, I said softly. Not to replace anything, not to pull you forward. Just here, with you. She leaned her forehead gently against mine, and for a long moment neither of us moved. The world around us quieted, the morning birds, the distant cars, the whispering neighborhood. None of it mattered. Only this, only her. The sun warmed the edges of her hair as she finally pulled back, her voice trembling with something fragile and hopeful. What do we do now? She asked. I lifted her hand, brushing my thumb across her knuckles. We take it slow, I said. We find our pace. And we don't hide. She nodded, exhaling a breath that sounded like release. For the first time, we walked back to my porch together openly, without fear of who might see. Mrs. Ellison peeked from behind her curtains, but Marin didn't look away this time. She simply squeezed my hand. Her courage wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, steady, real. And in that morning light, with her standing beside me, I realized something simple and overwhelming. We had both begun again. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more real stories to life.